Before we begin, take a moment to support the channel. Subscribe and like the video. It really helps us share real history and bring important stories like this to more people. Medical experiments on prisoners. During World War II, a history of science without humanity. Introduction. World War II was not only a conflict of armies and ideologies, but also a war against human dignity itself. Among its darkest chapters were the medical experiments conducted on prisoners, men, women, and children, who were stripped of their rights, identities, and humanity. Under the guise of scientific research and military necessity, doctors and scientists carried out brutal procedures that caused immense suffering and death. These experiments were not isolated acts of cruelty. They were systematic, state-supported crimes rooted in dehumanization, racism, and distorted interpretations of science. This history is not merely about the past. It is a warning about what happens when medicine is severed from ethics, when authority replaces compassion, and when human beings are reduced to objects. The victims of these experiments were prisoners of war, political dissidents, ethnic minorities, and civilians deemed undesirable. Their pain became data, and their deaths were recorded as results. This essay explores the medical experiments conducted during World War II, the ideology that enabled them, the institutions and individuals involved, the suffering endured by the victims, and the lasting legacy these crimes left on medical ethics and international law. The ideological foundations of medical crimes. The medical experiments of World War II did not emerge from chaos alone. They were grounded in ideology. In several regimes, especially in Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, science was weaponized to serve state goals. Racial theories, eugenics, and militarism reshaped medicine into a tool of control rather than care. In Nazi ideology, certain groups were considered biologically inferior. Jews, Roma, Slavs, people with disabilities, and others were labeled as threats to racial purity. This belief system justified extreme measures, including forced sterilization, euthanasia programs, and lethal experimentation. Doctors were taught that eliminating the unfit was a form of healing society. Similarly, in Imperial Japan, extreme nationalism and dehumanization of perceived enemies led to horrific experimentation. Prisoners were viewed as expendable resources for advancing military and biological knowledge. In both cases, ethical boundaries were deliberately erased. Consent was irrelevant. Pain was acceptable. Death was a calculated outcome. Concentration camps as laboratories. Nazi concentration camps became vast laboratories of suffering. Facilities such as Auschwitz, Dachau, and Ravensbrück housed thousands of prisoners subjected to experiments. Medical personnel, many with prestigious educations, worked alongside SS officers. Prisoners were selected for experiments based on physical traits, ethnicity, age, or simply availability. Refusal was impossible. Survival was rare. The camps provided what the perpetrators considered ideal conditions: complete control over human lives, unlimited test subjects, and secrecy protected by state power. Types of medical experiments. 1. Hypothermia. Experiments. One of the most infamous categories involved hypothermia. Conducted primarily at Dachau, these experiments aimed to determine how long pilots shot down over cold waters could survive and how best to revive them. Prisoners were submerged in ice water or left naked in freezing conditions. Doctors recorded body temperatures, heart rates, and time to unconsciousness. Many died during the experiments. Others were killed afterward for autopsies. Survivors described unbearable pain, hallucinations, and organ failure. The experiments produced little useful data, but resulted in countless deaths. 2. High-altitude experiments. To simulate conditions faced by Luftwaffe pilots, doctors used low-pressure chambers to replicate high altitudes. Prisoners experienced sudden decompression, causing air embolisms, ruptured organs, and brain damage. Many screamed, convulsed, or died in agony while doctors observed through windows. These experiments often ended in death, either during the procedure or immediately afterward. 3. Infectious disease experiments. Prisoners were deliberately infected with diseases such as malaria, typhus, tuberculosis, and hepatitis. At camps like Auschwitz and Buchenwald, researchers tested vaccines and treatments by comparing untreated prisoners with those given experimental drugs. High fevers, seizures, organ damage, and death were common. Those who survived were often left permanently disabled. 4. Surgical and anatomical experiments. Some experiments involved unnecessary surgeries without anesthesia. Limbs were amputated, organs removed, and bones broken to study trauma or transplantation. At Ravensbrück, women were subjected to experiments involving infected wounds, muscle removal, and bone grafting. Many were left crippled or executed to conceal evidence. 5. Sterilization and reproductive experiments. Obsessed with racial control, Nazi doctors experimented with mass sterilization methods. Prisoners were exposed to radiation, injected with chemicals, or subjected to surgical procedures designed to destroy reproductive organs. Women endured extreme pain, internal injuries, and infertility. Men were often left with severe infections or died from complications. 6. Twin and genetic experiments. Perhaps the most notorious experiments were conducted on twins, particularly children. Led by Joseph Mengele, these experiments sought to unlock the secrets of heredity. Twins were injected with chemicals, subjected to blood transfusions, and measured obsessively. If one twin died, the other was often killed so their bodies could be compared during autopsy. Japanese medical experiments. Unit 731. While Nazi crimes are more widely known, Imperial Japan conducted equally horrifying experiments through Unit 731. Operating in occupied China, Unit 731 performed live dissections on prisoners without anesthesia. Victims were infected with plague, cholera, and anthrax. Limbs were frozen and amputated to study frostbite. Biological weapons were tested on civilian populations. Men, women, and children were used as test subjects. Most were killed after experimentation. For decades, these crimes were denied or minimized. Prisoners of war and Allied victims. Medical experiments were not limited to concentration camps. Allied prisoners of war were also subjected to abuse. In Japanese camps, POWs endured starvation experiments, vitamin deficiency studies, and surgical procedures without anesthesia. Some German experiments targeted Soviet POWs, who were considered racially inferior and thus expendable. Millions died from neglect, starvation, and experimentation. The role of doctors and scientists. One of the most disturbing aspects of these crimes is the involvement of trained medical professionals. Many perpetrators were respected doctors, professors, and researchers. They published papers, attended conferences, and advanced careers using data obtained through torture and murder. Some claimed they were following orders. Others believed they were serving science or their nation. Their participation shattered the myth that education alone prevents cruelty. Liberation and discovery. As Allied forces liberated camps in 1944 and 1945, they uncovered evidence of medical atrocities, laboratories filled with instruments, records detailing experiments, and survivors bearing horrific scars. Testimonies revealed systematic abuse on an unimaginable scale. The world was forced to confront the reality that medicine had been transformed into a weapon. The Nuremberg Doctors' Trial. After the war, several perpetrators were tried in the Nuremberg trials, specifically the Doctors' Trial. Evidence included documents, survivor testimonies, and photographs. Some doctors were sentenced to death, others to imprisonment. Many, however, escaped justice or reintegrated into society. The Nuremberg Code and Medical Ethics. One lasting outcome of these trials was the creation of the Nuremberg Code, a set of principles governing human experimentation. It emphasized voluntary consent, avoidance of unnecessary suffering, and the right of participants to withdraw. Modern medical ethics. Institutional review boards and human rights laws are rooted in lessons learned from these crimes. The victims and their legacy. The true legacy of these experiments lies not in data or laws, but in the lives destroyed. Victims were robbed of health, families, and futures. Many survivors lived with trauma, disability, and silence. Remembering them is an act of justice. Their suffering demands that medicine remain anchored in humanity, compassion, and respect. Conclusion. Medical experiments on prisoners during World War II represent one of the darkest betrayals of human values in modern history. They reveal how easily science can be corrupted when ethics are abandoned and power goes unchecked. This history is not distant. It is a warning that progress without morality leads to destruction. By remembering these crimes, we honor the victims and reaffirm a commitment to protect human dignity always.